pride to have two eminent professors who are the giants in their respective fields and who are known across the length and breadth of Bharat. I welcome Professor Kanada Sabhavati ji, who is always with us. On the other hand, I am privileged to introduce Professor Gautam R. Desiraju ji. He is a structural chemist who has been in solid state and structural chemistry unit of Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore since 2009. Prior to this, he has been in University of Hyderabad for 30 years. He is one of the highly cited Indian scientists with more than 450 research papers, 60,000 plus citations, and an H index of 100. He has won several international awards in the field of chemistry. He has guided the PhD work of around 40 students. He has edited 3 multi-author books in solid state and supramolecular chemistry. At present, he is the chairman of Governing Council of Bose Institute, Kolkata. His recent book, Bharat India 2.0, is his first publishing venture outside the scientific domain and is concerned with the constitutional history of India and the reimagination of India as a civilization state rather than a nation state. I welcome Professor Sir to deliver keynote address. Thank you.
I'd like to move on. Yeah. Okay. Because you are before. There on the back window. You can
Uday, or Portugal, maybe. He'll be walking and talking.
I'll be walking. Remove the tape. I'll call you. Okay. Excuse me. This is for YouTube, is it?
Yes. Yes.
This is for you.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I take it everyone can hear me from the back of the hall. You can hear me? Very good. Now, this evening, I'd like to talk a little bit about my recent book, Bharat India 2.0. Now, people have asked me, many people have asked me, how is it that a professor in one of the hard sciences wrote a book on, say, the Indian Constitution of all things? Usually, I will say that Constitution of any country is the game plan for the country. And in this sense, the Constitution belongs to all of us who are citizens of this country. Because right down to very small things which affect our day-to-day life, the rules and procedures and regulations and everything is based on something which can be found in this Constitution. So to a certain extent, it is important and quite relevant for all of us to know something at least about the Constitution. It is us. And if we have any character as a people in a combined sense, that should reflect in the Constitution. Now, I found that the general knowledge of educated people and not so educated people in something called Constitution of India was quite feeble, quite negligible almost. And let us say 4 or 5 years ago, if even I myself had been asked, what do you know about the Constitution of India? I might have said, well, I don't really know much, but I guess it is meant for the judges and other people to say something about it. But I am a person who I am about 70 years old and I have lived most of my life in India. So except for about 5.5 years in the middle when I was not in India as a student mostly, I have lived in India. And anybody who is of average intelligence and average curiosity, living in the time when I have lived in this country, would have got the feeling that we have not sort of lived up to, let us say, anybody's expectations for a people who are generally above average in intelligence, living in a large country which is very well endowed with natural resources. Also, because of the blessings of geography, living in an extremely important geostrategic region of the world. The advantages that India has as a country is very considerable if you come to think of it. And yet, I found that considering all these things, somehow where we stood at the end of 75 years is really not commensurate with the sorts of people we are. I have traveled to about 30 to 40 countries all over the world in my professional life as a chemistry professor. And I can say without any feelings of jingoism or any false pride in the fact that I'm an Indian or something, that the average IQ of the Indian is higher than in almost every other country I have been to. So it is not a matter of IQ. We are intelligent enough. We are also resourceful enough. And we can get some things done, but somehow the whole thing doesn't seem to be adding up. Now, as a scientist, usually when scientists, many of you are science students or aspiring to be scientists, the general mode of approach of a scientist is to look at a whole lot of data, try to draw some conclusions from it, and try to work back a little bit and see why this thing has come the way it has come and Can we take it a bit forward? Usually there is a scientific problem. How do you crack that problem? How do you solve the problem? You try to provide a solution. This is the usual way in which scientists operate. So, I was thinking, I'm a little bit, the COVID time was a time when, was a depressing time for many. I think I'm maybe one of the few individuals who sort of enjoyed the solitude of COVID with the lockdown, because I started reading then more about this constitution. That's what got me interested and curious about the constitution. Because if everything is not looking so good, this thought started occurring to me, is there something wrong with the basic template on which this country was based and put into motion on 26th January 1950? Is there something wrong with that itself? Because if there is something wrong there, then no matter what we do and how hard we work, etc., how good our leaders are, and we've had very good leaders also, I would say, right from the beginning. Even then, it will not be any good if the basic template is not okay. And I found three big fault lines, I would call them, in this big country. And the fault lines were only confirmed to me after my reading of the constitutional debates. So this was a constituent assembly which had about 400 people in it, which came into being in middle of 46, before independence. So at the time of independence, which was also the time of partition, about 100 of these members went over to Pakistan. So there were about 300 members left, and they debated. There was a drafting committee, a very small drafting committee of about 7 or 8 people, headed by Ambedkar. So most of 1948, they wrote this thing. And almost every second day in 1949, they had debates. 165 days of debates in all. So all these debates I read and made notes. I read every single line of the debates, because that is all in the public domain in the official Government of India websites. There is no fake news or anything here. So it's there. So I read the whole thing. And I found that the three fault lines that I had identified informally were adequately borne out in the constitutional debates, because the members themselves knew that these were fault lines. And the members were fully aware of the fact that the document they produced finally on 26th January 1950 is not the perfect document. This they knew of. This I have no doubt. It was the best ad hoc thing that they could do. They were all fiercely nationalistic. They ranged from extreme, what we would call today left wing, to extreme right wing. But all were nationalistic people. And all somehow were very relieved that India had become independent, although there was a tremendous sadness that this independence came with partition. And I want you to buy my book and read it. I'm not going to tell you so much about the book today, because for that you have to buy the book and read it. But I want to tell you a little bit about my thought process as I was writing this book, why I wrote it the way I wrote it. This partition comes as a continuous thread throughout my book, all 5 chapters. This partition was not an ordinary thing. It occurred through a very bizarre combination of accidental factors. None of the people, in fact, even the ones who were actively involved in asking for partition and who were actively against the idea of India being partitioned, none of these people actually thought the partition would happen. This is also very clear when it finally happened. It is an event of no small consequence. The effects of partition still continue today. And the reason is the person when I was being introduced, the words nation state and civilizational state were brought in. India, as it turns out, or what I would more accurately like to call Bharat, is a civilizational state. Now, what do you mean by that? Civilizational state. What is a civilization? One of the best descriptions of a civilization was given by one of the members of the Constituent Assembly, S. Radhakrishnan. And in the debates itself, he says, civilization is a thing of the spirit. It is not something external, solid, and mechanical. It is the dream in people's hearts. It is the inward aspirations in people's souls, heart, soul. Not something external, not material. You can't catch it and touch it. It is something you feel. It is something that you are actually. Then look at this. He says, it is the imaginative interpretation of the human life and the perception of the mystery of human existence. And he says that is what civilization is all about. Now, a little later in the debates, I'll just read a small couple of sentences. And again, this is Radhakrishnan again. He says, a nation does not depend on identity of race or sentiment or on ancestral memories, but it depends on a persistent and continuous way of life that has come down to us. Such a way of life belongs to the very soil of this land. It is there indigenous to this country as much as the waters of the Ganges or the snows of the Himalayas. Now here he relates it to Ganga and all these things. Now at a higher level than Radhakrishnan, I think in Puducherry, the mother actually says, she even denies this Ganges and Himalaya and all that. She says, India is not the earth, rivers and mountains of this land. Neither is it a collective name for the inhabitants of this country. She's not talking anything more about Himalayas, Ganga and all those things. She says India is a living being, as much living as, say, Shiva. India is a goddess, as Shiva is a god. If she likes, she can manifest in human form. So you see, this is a much more powerful statement. And she then goes on to talk about Durga. And if you go to Puducherry, there is a big map that she has drawn, which is there in the main courtyard of the ashram and all that. It is what she calls Akhand Bharat, from Afghanistan down to Myanmar. And she drew this map many, many years after partition. This is nothing to do with partition. I think 56 or 57 was when she drew this map. And I'm coming back, see why I'm saying all this, I'm coming back to the idea of partition. She said about Durga, no? If you look at the Durga Sahasranamam or the Lalita Sahasranamam, in both these list of 1,000 names, this word Dhara occurs. And I think Dhara has many meanings in Sanskrit, but one of the meanings I think it really refers to here is earth, land, Bhumi, Prithvi. Durga Sahasranamam also has got the word Prithvi in it. So unlike a nation state, and I give in chapter 3 how these nation states are defined. They are mostly a European construct. They don't even belong to this part of the world. Unlike in a nation state, in a civilizational state, geography is very, very, very important. Without geography, there can be no civilizational state. I participated a month or so ago in one of these Twitter spaces. Anyway, youngsters like you and all that should get onto Twitter, and you should have your own discussions about my book and other books on Twitter spaces. Don't use Twitter just to troll people and retweet fake news. That is not the purpose of Twitter. I participated in one of these spaces. There were people from Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh in that group. Small group it was, 20-25 people. And at some point we were discussing common things between everybody and so on. It was a nice discussion. And one of the fellows from Pakistan actually said, "Why are we talking about all this?" He said, in these 4 countries, he says, "Hawa to ek hi hai." Definitely hawa to ek hi hai in charo desh mein. So what is this hawa? It is that hawa that again Radhakrishnan says you can't define, you can't catch. But it is there. It is very much there in this country. This land actually, I will say. I don't use the word country so much because there is a difference between country, nation, civilization, land. All these are slightly different meanings. Country is just a political construct. Nation is a bit more. Civilization is even more than that. And today, in the modern geopolitical context, there are 2 big civilizational states in the world. One is India, one is China. There is one half civilizational state also, that is Russia. Russia, after many centuries, especially with Putin and all that, they are now gradually, Putin says that this whole idea that started in Russia from Peter the Great of looking west and all that, he calls it a complete waste of time. He says Russia is not like the West. He says Russia is unique, it has got its own Russian civilization. And you should read the works of his philosophical guru, one fellow called Alexander Dugin. Dugin has got very strong ideas about Russia as a civilization. They have not defined it as yet properly in my view. But I think we have about 2.5 civilizations today in the world. And these are all important countries. These are all very big, powerful, rich countries. In the future, I feel, in the next 50 years, we will have 4 empires in the world, in the true sense of empire. America, India, China, Russia. And out of these 4, at least now today, about 2.5 of them are civilizational in nature. So essentially, if you read chapter 1 and chapter 2 of my book, it's the run-up to what I call the definition of a civilizational state. And chapter 1 and chapter 2 have to do with the constitutional history of India before independence, which is there, 50-year story, it is there, starting from 1895. That is chapter 1. Chapter 2 is how the constitution was written, the way it was written. And all the amendments also that followed after 1950. So that is the sort of a background reading you need to understand chapter 3, which is about the civilizational state. So to sum up this whole story in the first part of my talk, which will reach the end of the first part, is that in the end, they wrote a constitution that is meant for a nation state, whereas we are not a nation state. Imagine, I am size 7 shoe size. Suppose I get a very nice pair of shoes which is size 6. Can I wear it and even walk 5 feet? I'm given an even nicer pair of shoes, size 8. I may walk little more than 5 feet, but after that I will stumble somewhere. So if the major document doesn't suit the nature of the spirit of the people, how can it yield a good result? So therefore, the main key thesis of the book, which will come in chapter 4, which we will discuss for the rest of the talk, has to do with a possible solution to this dilemma. And it should start with a new constitution. We start all over again. And we require, therefore, what is called a dharmic constitution. Because the essence of this land is dharma. Dharma is a supra-religious concept. It goes above religion. As people like Swami Vivekananda and all said. People criticize him for his what is called Neo-Vedanta and all that, because he comes above. He says, Sanatana Dharma is such a huge umbrella that it covers everything. And towards the end of the book, I talk a little bit about how it explains satisfactorily the construction of the whole universe itself. It is not just to do with India or Bharat or world and all that. It is the entire. Again, I like to quote a lot from the Lalita Sahasranama. One of the things it says there is Aneka Koti Brahmanda Janani Divya Vigraha. Aneka Koti Brahmanda. So that means it goes beyond our conception even of space and time and all that. So how do we, in practical terms, how do we bring this dharmic element into the constitution? A simple analogy will suffice. And people have commented favorably, and this I want to set some misconceptions to rest. The difference between Rashtra and Rajya. So, Rashtra, you see, in any constitution, there will be some cultural spillover from the nature of the people itself into the constitution, whether it's nation state or civilizational state or anything whatsoever. It is impossible to avoid some spillover of the culture and the nature of the people in the constitution. That is all we mean by Rashtra. Suppose you take a simple example that happened few months ago. This lady, Queen Elizabeth II, she passed away. So they had a funeral in Westminster Abbey. She is the sovereign of a country which is one of the most secular countries in the world today. So much so that some of the minority groups there seem to be over-pampered also today. It is a country where they issued sovereigns with the goddess Lakshmi on it for the Deepavali in 2021 or something. So it's highly, highly pluralistic society. But when they did the funeral was done according to the Anglican rites of the English Church. Everything was done according to Anglican rites. The Archbishop of Canterbury officiated, with the Archbishop of York just standing over there and watching like a witness. According to the ancient rules of British monarchy, they did not bring one Gurdwara fellow to stand there. They did not bring an imam. They did not bring a pujari. None of these people were there. Only the Anglican priest was there. That is Rashtra. And that is what I think knowledgeable people are asking for. Hindu Rashtra means that and nothing more than that. What the leftists and Break India forces today are talking about is, they are taking something called Hindu Rajya and calling it as Hindu Rashtra. Hindu Rajya nobody wants. Because Hindu Rajya means a theocracy. A state that is run according to the rules of some religion. And in fact, Hindu Rajya itself is an oxymoron. Even if you take it at a very trivial level, Suppose you take Shaivites and Vaishnavites in South India. Do they agree on a single thing as regards the religious things and the ceremonies and the rites? No, they don't agree. So which one are we going to follow in this Hindu Rajya of ours? Do we follow Vaishnavite? Do you follow Shaivite? Or you follow Shakta tradition? You follow Tantric? Which one do you follow? Or do you follow Nastika, which is also allowed? So actually, Hindu theocracy is by its very definition, it's an impossibility. So please forget about that. And when anybody starts saying, oh, you guys want Hindu Rashtra, you want Hindu Rashtra, you want to disenfranchise Muslims. No, nobody wants to do any of those things. It is simply, they have made a straw man argument here and just calling what is actually Hindu Rajya as Hindu Rashtra. So that is one thing. What are my three fault lines finally coming? Three fault lines, Hindus, Muslims. What has happened today after 75 years? Hindus feel they are second-class citizens in their own country. The Muslims in the Congress era felt that they were patronized and used as vote banks. In the BJP government, they feel that despite the protestations of the government, everybody is out to kill them and, do some bad things to them. So the confidence of the Muslim community is shaken. So that is the Hindu-Muslim problem. Nobody is particularly happy today. Nobody. Second, upper caste, lower caste. Again, nobody is happy. Upper caste feels they have nowhere to go, they are all running away to America. That is not a solution. Lower caste, very funny. I have seen so many of them. They feel patronized. And especially if you go to the scheduled caste community, they feel that no matter, despite many generations of a special treatment, at a social level, they will not be accepted. So they too are not feeling happy. They feel patronized. They take the engineering seat, but at the end of it, they will say that no, we feel. Ambedkar actually brought out this problem. He said the constitution only affects the legal remedy to this problem. It doesn't concern itself with the social remedy. And he says unless at a societal level we accept all castes, little bit the RSS is trying to do that today. But that is also going in a different kind of excess. Because when you say that you will have 100% reservations, then they coolly say that the upper caste will be the collateral damage in this. You cannot take a whole group of people and call them collateral damage. Actually, within Tamil Nadu, this has done enough damage to the social fabric of the state that again nobody is particularly happy. Okay, none of us is very unhappy. We'll say that. But nobody is particularly happy. And for a country that wants to be aspirational, and if you want to listen to Prime Minister that by 2047 we have to become the best and all, unless everybody feels very positively enthused, upper caste, lower caste, Hindu, Muslim. Third fault line, center state. Here again nobody is happy. The center feels that the states are doing unnecessary kitch and troubling them in big national agenda. The states feel that the center is patronizing them and refuses to give them money. So they don't like to go with a beggar bowl to the center. So you see, once again, nobody is feeling happy. So if nobody is particularly happy, then the fault cannot lie with any of us. This is a scientist speaking. We have in science something called Occam's razor. Occam was a priest or something somewhere in Europe or England, I think, maybe 8 centuries ago. So he said that if there are many possible explanations for a certain problem or a situation, then he said, please choose that solution which is the simplest. Don't go for a more complicated explanation when a simple explanation will suffice. So in this book, I have dared to question the constitution itself. Because I am seeing, and all of us are seeing in the TV, the President of India, the Prime Minister of India, all these people saying, oh, constitution, constitution, very great. They bend their heads down, they touch it, as if it is Guru Granth Sahib or something. No, it is not like that. It is written by ordinary people. All of us sitting in this room, we could have easily been members of that Constituent Assembly if we had read few things and we were a little nationalistic, that's all. We want our country to come up. We can sit and write the Constitution. There's nothing. It is not a particularly difficult document to read also, let me assure you, ladies and gentlemen. So we were three fault lines thinking. Upper caste, lower caste, center, state, Hindu, Muslim. So we had to address all these things properly and not simply wish it away and somehow we will manage, somehow we will adjust karo. You cannot do adjust karo with this matter. And then once again, as I said, scientists like to give a solution. And so I have proposed a solution in chapter 4. Jagannath, if you don't mind coming and turning it around, I think many of you know what my solution is. It is that, I hope everybody can you bring it a little bit in the front maybe? A little bit, yeah. So this is our famous country. And I have advocated actually an India with 75 states. Now, what does 75 states have to do with a dharmic constitution? This is a question that might well come to your minds. On the one hand, he is saying dharmic constitution, on the other hand, he is saying 75 states. What is the connection between these matters? The thing is, if you look at powerful countries that have come to the top of the world, let us say England around 1850, or Germany around 1900, or America around 1950. Well, these were at the top of the world in those respective times. Any country that came up stressed its strongest point. Tomorrow when you go for a job interview or something, you will not go there and tell the interview board, see, I don't know this subject, or physical chemistry, I didn't study very well. You won't say all those things. Sometimes the interviewer will ask you, tell us in what subject we can ask you a question. Would any of you mention the subject in which you are weakest? No, you will say the strongest subject, you will say, please ask me. Whereas we in India since 1950 seem to have this masochistic tendency to only highlight our weak points. Hindus will say Muslims, Muslims will say Hindus, center will say state, state will say center, upper caste will say lower caste will say upper caste. We have nothing better to do than to only talk about our weaknesses. Yes, these are weaknesses. Yes, they have to be addressed. They must be addressed. But you don't go on talking only about your weaknesses and then trolling each other on Twitter and then abusing and all that. That's not a solution. What is our strength? Our strength, ladies and gentlemen, is our diversity. You know, we are very, very, very diverse. We enjoy this diversity. We revel in it practically. You know, you are here in Coimbatore. You just go a little bit towards the west, you will go into Kerala. Already the whole thing changes in so many ways. Both are there, both are nice. They should be different if they are different. Why not enjoy the difference? When we highlight our diversity, which is our strong point, then we will feel more like we are part of the whole. I know what you're going to say. If you have 75 states, you will cause fragmentation of the country, which is called balkanization. Because this is a tendency that was particularly in history happening in the Balkans, which is a small region in southeastern Europe. I will say, yes, you are right, but you are also wrong. Nation states fragment if you make them smaller. We've got 3 or 4 examples in the last century. Czechoslovakia was an artificial nation state that was created after World War I, which combined 2 completely different ethnicities, the Czechs and the Slovaks. The name itself is Czechoslovakia, completely a creation of the British and the French. That country couldn't hold together. 65 years, they separated from each other. Take Yugoslavia, which is another one like this. Again, the Balkans. A wild mixture of Serbs, Croats, Bosnians, Macedonians, Muslims, all sorts of people, Albania, Montenegro, all held together with one artificial construct called Yugoslavia. And there was one strong man called Tito, who somehow forcibly kept the whole thing together. The moment Tito died, the whole country split up. We have another artificial nation state, this famous place that was created in partition. It is a nation, it's an artificial nation state created by the British. And today you watch, the first part split off in 1971 itself. It couldn't hold. Religion was not a strong enough binding force to keep Pakistan together. Now today ethnicity is again coming to the front. The Pashtuns are different from the Baloch, who are different from the Sindhis, who are different from the Punjabis. And if you take my 75 states, you will see the first one here in the book. One is Gilgit and 2 is Baltistan. So you see, I am good not only at predicting crystal structures, for which I have become very famous, but I wrote this in the middle of 2021. And when I announced it first time, this division of states in the Atharva Forum in Delhi in June last year, the presiding as the chief guest was Professor Murli Manohar Joshi, whom I happen to know quite well as an academic person, not as a politician, because he is a very well-known professor of physics, by the way, if you didn't know. And he has trained very many good physicists from Allahabad. So I knew Professor Joshi as a physics person. So I told him, I said, you will be happy. He was presiding. I said, first is Gilgit and second is Baltistan. So he threw his head back and started roaring with laughter. So people said, why have you put it there? I said, no, don't wait, don't worry. They will come on their own. We don't have to send a single soldier to that place. And if you see the news from Baltistan today, the fellows there are simply saying, you please open the road to Kargil, we want to come inside. And I have talked about this in chapter 3. That when you have a powerful civilizational state which is also becoming economically strong, many of the things in the surrounding areas will want to be associated with this in one way or the other. So, excuse me, we will take, if you don't mind, questions in the very end. All questions in the end. Now, a little bit about the 75 themselves and why these were divided by me the way they were divided. There is a basic administrative thing which has been pointed out since 1956 in the Panikkar Commission for States Reorganization, that smaller states are easier to administer. This is a well-known fact throughout the world. And at the administrative level, many of our states are simply too big. No excuse for states that are so big. So there is an administrative thing. Apart from that, I have used geography, history, religion, culture, language, and geostrategic importance. All these factors have come into play in the way in which I have divided these things. And each state, each of the 75 is then described in a paragraph or so. So most of chapter 4 is concerned with the justification of these particular things. Now, if your eyesight is sharp, you will notice that even in these 75, there are some darker lines here that are going through. And these darker lines is something that I discussed with my second son, who actually drew the map. adapting from uh, a map drawn a little bit earlier by a chap called C.B. Thomas, who is Indian who lives in San Francisco. So I've discussed with C.B. Thomas quite often, and my second son Govind and I, we prepared this map with some inputs from him. And he suggested these darker lines, which are, let us say, measures of macro diversity. This is also important. The elements of micro diversity are the 75 states, but for example, the regions of macro diversity, this is what we call mountain zone. Gilgit, Baltistan, Ladakh, Kashmir, Jammu, Himachal, Uttarakhand. As distinguished from the northern zone, which is the plains area, starting with Punjab and ending with eastern UP, western Bihar. So this is the basic Indus, Ganga, Yamuna basin. And this is the part that we lost also, that side. So actually, if you take Mahabharata, Puranas and all that, entire thing from here, from Takshashila and all that, this entire northern plain is actually the crucible of Sanatana Dharma in this country. So everything that we have now from Vedas and everything has come from that region. So that is another region. Then we have the west, which consists of present day Rajasthan and Gujarat. Then we have the east, which is this whole region which includes now our portion of Bengal, bits of present day Bihar, Orissa, Jharkhand, and so on. This is the east. Then this is the northeast over here, which is quite distinct culturally. Then we have the center, which is a large geographically distinct region, sparsely populated, and yet quite distinct from the other regions, mostly geographically and culturally. Some of the most ancient parts of Bharat are located in this central India. So then we have the southwest, which is very interesting, which consists of mostly bits of Maharashtra, modern day Maharashtra, and a bit of Goa and stuff like that. And then this large thing, the largest of the zones, is the southern zone. And since we are in South India and most of us are South Indians, I'd like to pose some questions to the audience. Is there something called a South Indian identity, which is a macro level measure of diversity? Is there anything common between the so-called 5 states of this region, which makes it sufficiently distinct from the rest of the country? Now, when I took these 7 zones, the 7 zones were defined in a sense that any state in each zone is more like each other than it is to any other state outside that zone. Then in that case, do the states of South India, the 5 states or the subdivisions that I proposed, do we have sufficient identity to call ourselves South Indians? What is a South Indian? Is there any identity like that at all? Because an identity that is defined by saying, I hate Hindi, that is, in my opinion, not enough. You can never have in science or in any other subject. You cannot have a definition of anything as a negative of something else. Pakistan was defined as a negative of India. And that definition has not held. Even 75 years, it's not held. We often joke in our own subject, by the way. Inorganic chemistry. What is not organic chemistry? So, many inorganic chemists, they say, no, it's actually our subject itself is defined like a negative. It's not a very good definition. So, which is why in some German-speaking places it is called general chemistry. They don't like the word inorganic chemistry. So, any definition based on a negative, like I hate Hindi is, to my mind at least, I don't speak Hindi very well, but will never say I hate Hindi. At the same time, maybe I feel like a South Indian. What is a South Indian? I want to ask you this. Maybe you take this question home. I'll take the answers at the end of the talk. Is it the place where we prefer coffee to tea? No. Nilgiris here is a place where most of the good tea also grows. I'm sure you can get good cups of tea here. Or is it the place where the script is all kind of curving like that? No. Tamil Nadu, the script is all like boxes. So what defines South? I think these are not questions that my book throws up. And then when I go to the micro-diversity, the states themselves. Now why do I say that the 75 states make a lot of sense? The 75 states, lots of people, I've got a lot of positive response from people, especially in this part, Kashi, Mithila, especially Koshal. I didn't realize that people of Koshal region feel so different from people in Orissa. And many people love the way in which I have gone back to old names like Mithila, Awadh, Panchal, Braj. Some of these names go back to the Mahabharata and Ramayana. So they say that, in fact, reintroducing these names, you are giving a natural sense of things. For example, Kashi. Let me take Kashi. Kashi for me belongs to the 4 Ks. I'm going to talk about the 4 Ks a little bit. And we'll start with Kashi. 4 Ks are nice, good examples. Now, Kashi was originally an ancient Buddhist center. It is not a Hindu center to start. It's a very strong, powerful Buddhist center. Sarnath is only 16 kilometers from modern day Benares. And the Shaivite portion was actually a little bit east of Kashi, in a portion of Bihar which is called Araria. That was the Shaivite center. Now today, if you take modern day area of Kashi, I have defined it in such a way that everybody here speaks Bhojpuri. I told you, sometimes I use language also. So everybody here speaks Bhojpuri, and in fact I had a message from somebody recently. One of the lovely things about writing this book is I get so many mails and comments and things from completely unknown people. And he said it was a great idea. He says, why didn't you call it Bhojpur? Why did you call it Kashi? It's okay, what's in a name? But I said the idea is that everybody there speaks Bhojpuri, which, if you have heard it, sounds quite different from Hindi. It doesn't sound like Hindi at all after a certain point. Now, Kashi is also a center, Islamic center, hardly less than a kilometer from Vishwanath Temple. Is the famous weaving community, Muslim weaving community of Benares, which stays in a small area called Madanpura. All your Benares sarees are woven by Muslim weavers. How many of you knew that? So it is a Hindu center, obviously, a Buddhist center and a Muslim center. Now the idea that comes to my mind, I don't know what idea comes to your mind. But when I went to Vatican City with my family a couple of years ago, we were paying enormous sums of money in the form of euros to go and see some relics of some saint, somebody, some bones of somebody else, and something. A lot of money we were putting down. And then looking at the churches and saying, oh, how nice, or something. So when I see something like Kashi, I feel that that whole area can be developed like a super Vatican City. Like almost you can say, come on, you can see, 3 in 1, you can see 3 religions there. And we'll showcase all this thing. And we will get people to come and pay good money to see our stuff. Take it as a biggest tourism hub of the country. I have said in a recent podcast, I talked a little bit about Kashi, and I said Kashi is a place where kings come and kings go. Some king comes, he demolishes something, another king comes, he puts something else. The king will come and the king will go, but Kashi will stay forever. It will never go away. It is that thing what Radhakrishna everybody says, it is can't catch it. It's a Kashi is an idea. Can we market that idea? and get people to pay money, like what China is doing. So you can leverage something like this economically. Now, if you take Banaras or Gorakhpur and all, which are in my state of Lucknow is very far away. Very, very, it's like another planet. Nothing in Banaras is like anything in Lucknow. So that is my first K. Second K is Kashmir. Just the valley. It's a place where I've gone to very often through the course of my work and where I have very many dear friends who've told me a lot. Most of them are Muslims, Sunnis and Shias and a few Hindus. There are not many Hindus in Kashmir, but some of the people, my friends, are from Jammu region where there are more Hindus. And I've been there. Now, what is this Kashmir all about? You forget all this recent junk which has been happening about 370 and Kashmir and Pakistan and all these things. Now, if you go to valley anywhere, you find just like some weeds, everywhere this lavender plant grows. It needs no water. The smell is quite obvious and fragrant. Rose is another thing that grows extremely easily, and I'm sure all of you have heard of saffron from Kashmir. It grows in a small district called Pampore, which is part of one of the districts, Pulwama district. Pampore is a small place in that, and all the saffron grows there. Now, these plants are very, very peculiar to that area. It's very difficult to get them to grow elsewhere. Roses, especially, are pretty wild. They grow all over the place. Now, you see, rose, lavender, saffron, they are all important commercial crops. Because from rose and lavender, you can get the oils, essential oils, which are an essential constituent of perfumes. Very high value added perfumes, French perfumes and this kind of thing. And there is a small country in southeastern Europe called Bulgaria, which today has a monopoly of practically of rose oil and lavender oil. They are the world leaders. They dominate in that market. They are doing something in Kashmir, but it is all in some jugaad style. It's very, 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 very approximate what they do, and the oil they produce also is of poor quality, which is not meeting the international standards. So suppose like in the ministry in Kashi, you have only the tourism department important. In Kashmir, you have only the commerce department and agriculture department as important. Saffron, we say Kashmir saffron, but do you know that only 15% of the word saffron is grown in Kashmir? 85% comes from Spain and Iran. What do these countries have to do with saffron? Almost nothing. We were just sleeping and shooting each other. And we didn't realize that what we have got here in the form of this saffron. If you develop that thing properly, you can beat Spain and Iran. You can beat Bulgaria. So if Kashi is an economic powerhouse through tourism, Kashmir is an economic powerhouse in the form of the natural products and the oils. The third K is Kutch, in the western corner. So we may ask, what is there in Kutch? Why has he defined a state called Kutch? There was a big agitation. Gujarat was created in 1960, but almost on the same day, Saurashtra and Kutch started demanding special statehood. Once again, the same thing. If the people in Srinagar say that Jammu is very far away, it is. Mentally and psychologically, it's all very far away. People in Bhuj say that Ahmedabad is very far away. So what is there in Kutch? Nothing. That's the beauty of Kutch. Nobody lives there. There is no rain. That's why nobody lives there. There are only salt pans. Salt pans means there's a lot of sunshine, no rain. So if there's a large area of land with lot of sunshine, what would any economically savvy person think? That can be exactly, you got it. It becomes a solar energy capital not only of India but of the whole world. Today the solar energy leader is Israel, a small country which is much smaller in area than Kutch. So if we can give Vatican City a ride for its money in Kashi, and if we give Bulgaria a run for its money in Kashmir Valley only, we can give Israel a run for its money in Kutch. No surprises for guessing which the fourth K is going to be, and this is the place where we are now, Congo. So I told you there are 4 Ks: Kashi, Kashmir, Kutch, and Congo. It was correctly pointed out to me before we started that this is an economic powerhouse. My wife told me yesterday that it was called Manchester of India. Yes. You make cloth here, very good cloth. And then in the satellite town of Tirupur, you make them into garments. When you think about all these things, you realize this silly country, Bangladesh, which is now calling itself world leader, we can beat Bangladesh in this business because we've got a much better tradition. We've got the whole wherewithal, we've got the infrastructure. Once again, I'll say, for people in Kuwait, Chennai is way too far away. You develop only with the Ministry of Textiles or Ministry of Commerce, Industry, that's all. One important, very important caveat which I should tell you in the 75 states, which is written in the book, is that, and this comes up in chapter 2 especially, is the total unsuitability of the Westminster system of governance to this country. I have written somewhere we defaulted into the Westminster system only because the British were ruling us, for no other reason. The Westminster system is not meant for a country with different states. The UK doesn't have states. The Westminster system is only meant for a country with an unwritten constitution, and there is only one country in the world with an unwritten constitution, and that is the UK. So no country with a written constitution can actually implement that Westminster system correctly. So if you want to know more about Westminster system, please read chapter 2 and chapter 3 and why it is unsuitable. 75 states can only be brought about if you switch completely to the US system, which means complete separation of legislature and executive. I am a great admirer of the US Constitution and I have written it in many places in the book. Dr. Ambedkar was also a great admirer of the US Constitution. I don't know why he didn't go for that model. There was some discussion. I think we just went for the Westminster model because we were too tired. Don't know what else to do. And then we had that Government of India Act 1935, which was sort of practically, half our constitution is in that 1935 Government of India Act. So we simply, this criticism that ours is a cut and paste constitution is very correct in my view. We need something for ourselves. For Bharatiyas, we need our own stuff. And I think many people say, oh, you will have 75 chief ministers. No, we will have 75 elected governors. And each of these governors will bring with them their own cabinet of technocrats. So in Kashi, for example, you will get a very good man as the tourism minister. In Kashmir, you will get a very good agricultural scientist as the agriculture minister. He will not be elected. Only the governor will be elected. Similarly, at the center, only the president will be elected. The present president of India, which is some kind of a very shadowy imitation of the British sovereign, actually we don't even need that position, in my view. An elected president like in the US, and the legislature which only makes laws. See, what has happened in the Westminster system in India is very much highlighted today. When you have a single party majority like we have today, and suppose you happen to be a member of parliament from the BJP, and you are not a minister, you are almost like a big zero. You have no work. You are elected, all right. You will have to vote according to the party whip. And we've got one funny law called anti-defection law, which I have spoken about in 3-4 pages. It's a very bad law. And the fact of the matter is, it was passed unanimously in 1985. So even things that are passed unanimously, Manish Tiwari has written in many places that this is a wretched law, which has actually prevented proper parliamentary debate in our country. So, because of this anti-defection law, if you are not a minister and you happen to be a member of parliament, you have no work to do. And that is why when people get elected into the BJP or any party which has got a majority, there is a terrible urge to become a minister. Everybody wants to become a minister because if you become a minister, you not only make the laws but you also implement the laws. So immediately what will happen is you will get corruption. I am not saying there is no corruption in the US. It is there, but it will be at a more limited level. So when you take 75 states, please don't ask me 75 chief ministers blocking the traffic. No. Yes, for the common people, yes, every time the chief minister, that Bombay comes anywhere in Bangalore, the traffic gets blocked. After some time, we start hating the chief minister simply because he is blocking the traffic. But 75 elected governors with their technocrat cabinets is an entirely different matter altogether. So let the legislatures make the law, let the executive execute the laws. And by having this diversity model with all these states, the natural urgings of the people will then come up. And again, remember, in a civilizational state, more states will actually strengthen because diversity is our strong point. I always like to say that, culinary wise, masala dosa in Bangalore tastes very different from Chennai. It looks different also. Both are nice. Better that they be both different also. It will be very bad if we try to uniformize that masala dosa and say, that's what they're trying to do in the European Union. And the French are shouting so much. And they're saying you can't call something as French cheese or something. You must call it European cheese. This is a bit like our secular state business. No secular state. We are all happy to be Hindus, we are happy to be Muslims. Come on, let us all be there. Don't make a big deal about. And that's the biggest problem with the constitution. And which is why I hope that when the 75 states thing come, I'm fairly sure it will come because there are many people whom I've talked to now who told me, serious people, who said we never thought a solution will come something like this. Because you are highlighting only what we are very good at doing. We are very fond of saying, that my small thing is better, this is better, my dosa is better, your idli is better. We love to do that all the time. But at the same time, none of us is in any doubt that we are Indians or that we are Bharatiyas. We have no doubt about that whatsoever. It doesn't mean that that's going to come at the preference of everything else. My very, very last statement has to do with Tamil Nadu, which are divided into 4 states, and one of which is Kongu Nadu. There is a state I want to point out this, what I call this one here, Pandya Nadu. And why I have made a small state there called Pandya Nadu. It's not just a nostalgia for some name or something. This, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the most strategic regions of India today. It is one of the most strategic regions because it controls this general area, controls the shipping routes from the 2 choke points in the world's maritime traffic. The first choke point is at the Gulf of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf, and the second choke point is in the Gulf of Malacca in Singapore. Between the Gulf of Hormuz and the Gulf of Malacca, 100,000 ships go every year. 100,000, big ones. And this shipping lane is of vital importance to China because all its stuff, all its imports, all its exports go through this sea lane. There is nothing in the world that the US will want more than having a small country here which incorporates parts of southernmost Tamil Nadu, southernmost Kerala, Sri Lanka and all this. There is nothing they want more than that. That is the real Tukde gang. So when you have a small state like this should be bristling with defense things. He who controls this portion properly will control this entire thing here. So when I say geostrategy, Nagarkoil or Tirunelveli, Thoothukudi, why do you think they did all that with Sterlite? Have you ever thought about it? That is a Achilles heel point. Whether it is the church or the Islamists or the Chinese or the Americans, we don't know who was behind that whole thing. But definitely the whole world looks at that thing carefully. And so that is a place which we must really strengthen, keeping it as a small state. The distance again between that and Chennai is too much. The other two states, of course, one is Toranadu, and there again it will rival Kashi. If you take density of grand temples, just in that small area around Tanjavur, Kumbakonam, Mannargudi, it is something that whole world will want to come and see if we showcase it properly. I have been to so many European countries all over the place. Practically no country in Europe I have not visited. Things that are so puny and insignificant compared to what we have in Tamil Nadu alone. They make so much money out of all this. And yet, we not even realize that the whole world will pay good money to see all this stuff. And finally, the last one, which I call Tonde Mandalam, where I have kept as capital Kanchipuram, not Chennai, would be the gateway into the world in terms of international trade. And I have purposely put Kanchipuram because I have said that this is a well-established tradition in America, where the biggest place in the state is not the administrative capital. Albany is the capital of New York State, where New York is the biggest city. Sacramento is the capital of California, where the biggest city is Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco. Austin is the capital of Texas, whereas the biggest city there is Dallas-Fort Worth. This is very, very common in many countries, and Kanchipuram today is practically a satellite town of Chennai. So that is why I have read the book, and notice my choice of state capitals also. Each one of these state capitals is chosen for a reason, for a meaning. There is a meaning behind it. It's not something that I just decided, okay, this sounds nice, let me put it. No, nothing there I put like that. Everything is with a reason. So this, I think we will stop here now. And about other things, you please read. I got to know a lot about my own country after writing this book. Frankly speaking, I didn't realize it was such a beautiful country. And the fact that there were so many things going on here of which I had no knowledge about. I'm just thinking what we call Baghelkhand. There are things there in Baghelkhand which come from the Neolithic age. When human beings were hardly human beings, there are signs of habitation in that place, and they do want that area. The people still feel betrayed that Baghelkhand, which was originally Rewa, was split between UP and MP. They felt bad ever since then. And they're not going to become less of Indians simply because you call it Baghelkhand. It's not going to be. People also ask me about the 6 Muslim majority states: Gilgit, Baltistan, Hastinapur, Kamtapur, Malabar, and Kashmir. They ask me, oh, these will all become mini Pakistans. No, nonsense. Nothing like that will happen. Because there must be something which we call as civilizational confidence. If Dharma is so big and it goes above all religions, Dharma means what? Doing the right thing. That's all. If we do the right thing, nobody will want to go. And the other thing is, I also said the center must be armed with superpowers. If there is any tendency of any place to want to go away from the Union, and it should not be left to the mercy of the Supreme Court. This is also, I have written a little bit about judicial reform. All this is very much part of the story. You cannot have unelected people coming and telling us that you burst crackers or you don't burst crackers and all sorts of things. I mean, that is another story which you should also pick up from the book. Eswananda Bharati, the other day when Vice President said that that whole thing has to be looked at again. And the whole concept of basic structure, in my view, is nonsense. Basic structure is something anybody who is selling banana in the cart should understand. What is basic structure? What is the basic structure? Basic structure is undefined. If you want me to put one word on basic structure, Dharma. That's all. Fellow who is selling banana in the cart, he knows what is Dharma. No problem. You should not read one Supreme Court lawyer, judges and all to tell us what is basic structure. No. There's more just hiding behind words. So like that, you can go on talking and reading. I think I've spoken long enough. So now I leave you to firstly buy the book. First, important, buy the book. Read the book. Try to find fault in the book. Discuss with your friends. Sometimes if it is possible, discuss with me, but I can't reply to anybody. So many people write to me today. So sometimes if I like to, I try to get a reply. But talk to others. Say that we've heard this professor today, he's saying something which I have not heard before. Nobody has said this before. That a constitution itself has to be changed, that by putting 75 states, you will increase the diversity quotient of this country and thereby make all of us feel part of the whole venture called Bharat or India 2.0. This book is dedicated to the young people of this country. I have written, meant for young people. We have made enough mistakes in my generation. And you people should not make our mistakes. And you should take it forward and take something which we call India now and make it into Bharat. Thank you very much.
Floor is open for questions.
Good evening, sir. It was very enlightening. I just have one question. Why didn't you include Nepal within the, since they are our civilization brothers in all sense? Thank you.
If I included Nepal, I would have to include Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, parts of Indonesia, Thailand, Bali, everything. Because they are all Hawa ek hi hai. And yes, it is part of our civilizational ethos. But in any civilizational state, it welcomes and it tolerates regions in the periphery that roughly belong to the same thing. Who knows? Already people in Baltistan, already people in who are there in Baltistan want to come to India. It may well be that people in Nepal want to come. Or it may lead to some kind of a loose association, which is what I really feel will happen. I won't be alive then, but say in another 25 years, let us say at the time when India becomes about a 10 trillion or 12 trillion economy, many of these small things in the periphery will want to be somehow associated with something called a Greater India Economic Zone. A bit like Mexico and Canada, and the US. See, they are separate countries, all right. But their fates are so closely associated with the US that you can hardly think of them as different countries. So I think Nepal will come very much into that. I also predict that what we call today West Pakistan or Pakistan, it will not exist in the present form very soon. I have been telling a lot of my friends that this so-called artificial country, it cannot last. Basically, and now you are seeing it is falling apart due to its own contradictions, not what anybody else is doing. Which shows the inherent weakness in the way in which it was even constructed in the first place.
Good evening, sir. Sir, you asked us a question saying that is there any separate, distinct identity for South Indians like that? So I don't think we don't have any distinct identity. We have only one identity, that is Bharat. We are all Bharatians. The race, the DNA, everything is same. This is a pure broad only Dravidian political parties which has been hashed for the last 50, 60 years. With all these things, they are doing good kind of politics and make us always think that we are something different from North Indians and we don't want Hindi, we are separate, we don't have any connection, all these things. It has been completely applied with the Dravidian parties. Thank you.
Well, I really don't want to get into a political discussion, especially when I'm in the physical domains of the state of Tamil Nadu. But I will say that it is a political thing, and since the very existence of the Dravidian parties depends on this narrative, which actually started long ago. It started with De Nobili 3-4 centuries ago, and then with, what was his name, G.U. Pope, Bishop Caldwell, and a number of things that have happened since the early 19th century. And which is why, in a very general context, I will say that the issues, I will not call them problems, issues that come up in Tamil Nadu are quite distinct from the issues that, say, come up in Bengal or Punjab or Maharashtra. Now, why do I mention these other states? Because these other states are all pretty large states and also quite significant states which have had a continuous tradition of being at loggerheads with the union government for one reason or another. But in the case of, say, Bengal, or in the case of Maharashtra, or in the case of Punjab, these are not ideological differences. They are more of a certain political type or electoral or something like that. In the case of Tamil Nadu, it's different because the very existence of this, it's part of their political ideology. It is not got to do with electoral things. And whether they do it through manipulation of caste and the thing, but every political party, Congress, BJP, they use caste calculations for the electoral things. That is nothing very distinctive about the Dravidian parties here, that they are using caste as a way of getting votes. I think what is different in Tamil Nadu is that without this narrative, the party itself will cease, the whole movement will cease to exist. Which is why I feel, I always tell my friends in the Sangh and other places, you please don't worry about the other states. Ideologically, please look at Tamil Nadu, because here it's an ideological conflict. It's not a political conflict. Please don't get it wrong. And so for them, it is very much a matter of existence. And I will say again in the final context, since you're talking about Tamil Nadu and I refer to Bengal, another state where I have traveled very extensively and I know quite a bit about Bengal itself, that my model for 75 states gives an ideal win-win combination of a politically strong center and economically strong states. A state needs to be economically strong. A state should not keep going to Mrs. Sitaraman and asking her for money. Bhavati Bhiksham Dehi. You can't do that. It spoils the self-respect of the state to go to the center with a begging bowl all the time. The state is the one that does all the things for you, health, education, roads, drains, water. All the day-to-day things for us are done by the states. So the state needs money to do all this. My formula for developing the economy of the states, whether it is Kashi or Kashmir or Congo, the state should be allowed to keep the money it makes, not put it into some grand pool called central government. If you really think about it seriously, a central government does not need money. It needs money only for defense, foreign affairs, communications, fiscal policy, currency. Actually, none of these things except defense need a lot of money. The states need the money. The states need to be economically strong. A state, if it becomes politically strong, it disturbs the union. The union, on the other hand, must be politically strong. Tomorrow, if China and Pakistan do some kiri-kiri, the center has to be able to deal with them. Center does not need to be economically strong. That is the state's job. Center does not even have to start IITs and IIMs and ISERs and all these things. Center has no business getting into education. Although I have worked in central government education institutions all my life, I have always felt that it is not required and not necessary for the union government to get into education at all. It is the state's problem. If people here want to teach everything in Tamil, that is their lookout. If people in Bengal want to teach everything in Bengali, it is their lookout. Because finally I have seen that unless you are thinking only in your mother tongue, we don't think in English. So if we are thinking in our mother tongue, the most imaginative work will come out when we are taught everything in the mother tongue. So this is why these things are pretty important. I'm glad you brought up TN a little bit. But as I said, it is an ideological thing. And we don't know if this full Dravidian cycle that started with De Nobili in 17th century, whether it is finally reaching its last days or not. We'll have to see really what happens. Thank you.
Namaste, sir. It was indeed a productive session by all means. Myself, Aravind, and I'm calling from Palakkad, and I see a student as well as a constitution law enthusiast. I have two questions. The first one being whether preamble could be amended to include or to say add the dharmic aspect which you emphatically mentioned during the course of your talk. And regarding the amendment which happened in 1976 by the Prime Minister under auspices of the Prime Minister to include the socialism, secularism, and all those stuff. Could we delete those two aspects, that is socialism and secularism, and then add this dharmic aspect so that we could really have this underpinning core thing of Hindu Rashtra? So, and the second question is, this is something which I find most embarrassing one, to be precise. So when I speak something or when I attend some conferences like these, which talks about this Hindu Rashtra and the Hindu Dharmic aspect, people, even including in my family itself, many secularists and people of that sort, always ask me this question of what is this Hindu Rashtra all about? So if you could put it in an incisive side of your inimitable style, that would be a great thing for me. Thank you.
Thank you. First question. It was put in by Mrs. Gandhi in 4 days' time. So it can be removed in 1 day's time. This is not the issue. And probably today the ruling party has got enough majority to do it. But I think changing the preamble alone is not enough. I do believe that the constitution itself has to be rewritten completely. It has gone beyond the stage of tinkering with it anymore. And whatever damage those words, socialism and secularism, have done, they have already done it. About your family members, I will simply say that, buy a dozen copies of my book and just throw it one to each of them and ask them to start reading it seriously. I have talked about secularism and socialism, the fact that you can't have such words in the preamble. We firstly do see Sanatana Dharma is essentially secular. We have got Nastika and atheism, everything is allowed, I say. We have a room even for atheists. And even Buddhism, which doesn't believe in the Vedas, is also given some part to play in all this. So inherently it is secular. So to tell a Hindu or Sanatani, I would say, I don't like the word Hindu, to tell a Sanatani to be secular is kind of silly, because by very nature he or she is secular. Secular, by the way, please tell your relations. It's a peculiarly Christian concept which came in the Middle Ages because there was something called a secular domain which was defined by the kings and the emperors to distinguish it from the spiritual domain, which in those days was represented by the Pope. They felt Pope was becoming too powerful, and popes were very strong about 400-500 years ago. So to curb the power of these popes, there was a spiritual domain and a secular domain. So typically this word secular itself pertains only to Christianity. It doesn't pertain to any other faith, actually, if you ask. And I think around 1947 or so, if you asked Indians, what is this word secular? I think almost 99.9% wouldn't even have known about the existence of this word secular. This secular word has been sort of bandied around, used, misused, like the Hindutva word. So anybody will call it whatever they like. So please tell them that there is no such thing. We are all secular. Absolutely, we are secular. So those words, these are all come. And also socialism. Socialism is an economic policy. You may want to see, actually I think if you ask me, we needed socialism around 1960. We don't need socialism now. Today socialism should mean equality of opportunity, not equality of outcomes. What we are trying to do is we are saying we want to have equality of outcomes. How can you have equality of outcomes? You give the fellow something like that, then you start giving him one more thing. Then what happens is, then at the end of the day, the Chinese and Americans and Russians, they are not following all these policies. So tomorrow if we have to build a better chip, or if we have to make a better drug, or if you want to make a better computer program, you cannot want to win a cricket match. You can't win it with reservations. You can't have upper caste chip, silicon chip, middle class silicon chip, lower class silicon chip. Silicon chip is silicon chip. So somewhere along the line, I think, what has happened today is all these things have got linked up with votes, getting votes. And a very nice review of my book, I don't know which printing they have sent, third printing, a gentleman called Bhavesh Kansara has written a review where he says this entire book is written without the word gerrymandering coming even once. So none of these 75 states have been defined with the idea that a particular caste or a particular group or a particular leader will win the election in that state. Because that is what gerrymandering is all about. So electoral things are very transient, very temporary. So this book, please do not confuse this map, Desiraju's map, saying, oh, he wants certain political parties to win. That's why absolutely very far from the truth.
Okay, very insightful
talk, sir. Present a wonderful presentation. And thank you for obliging when we requested you in Pondicherry last weekend, and you were here in probably 10 days. Thank you so much, sir. May I now request Mrs. Vaishnavi Guru Shankar to present the momentum to Professor Desiraju.
Thanks, man.
May I now request Shri Ramasundar Prasad ji to present the vote of thanks.
Good evening to all of you. It was a great idea, which I think Sri Gautam Desiraju has presented to us through this book. And he has taken a lot of pains to explain the new proposal to make a new India. Of course, when the India became independent, there was no state based on linguistic basis. Linguistics basis came after Desiraju committed harakiri in Andhra Pradesh for a separate Telugu speaking state. So the government of India decided to divide the country into various linguistic bases. But the Telugu speaking people itself never remained together. They split into Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. So that experiment has shown that it is total flop. So now the time that we should look at a new experiment is really based on strong fundamentals that a country can be divided on idea of dharma and also make it a more decentralized administration. I think the United States has around 42 states, am I right?
50.
50 states. We can also have 75 states, there is no harm in that. And it can be, this idea has to be further developed, and all you youngsters should think of this, talk about it to your friends and all that. Go through the book. I can't speak much because I have not read the book. I'm buying the book today so that I could read more and understand the various points which he has mentioned. It's a brilliant idea. I think we should take it forward. And I should thank Verandah Club and Jagannathan for organizing a great evening like this, and thank all of you for a patient hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And thank all the audience who have come. Members from Congrad Arts and Science and Ratnam College, and also the Cosmopolitan Club for all the hospitality extended. Plus, Kanak Sabapati ji taking your time and spending time with us. And my colleagues around, all of you, thank you so much. And the books are available in the venue, and you can get it autographed by Professor Gautam Desiraju himself. Thank you.